webinar by my colleague, Dr. Hamza R'BOUL. Hamza is a research assistant professor in the Department of International Education at EDUHK. His research focuses on social linguistics, intercultural communication, higher education, and decoloniality. Today, Hamza will speak about the intercultural and epistemological dilemmas of approaching and interpreting internationalization of higher education from within and for the global south, or as Hamza has maybe global souths. So it's not a singular but plural form, and that's what during his presentation we will learn about these dilemmas in terms of how we philosophize and interpret these differences and challenges. So during Hamza's presentation, please keep your microphones on mute and use the chat room for questions and comments. I will read this, or you will read these questions and comments later, and we'll have a little bit of time just to ask Hamza questions or give him our feedback. So Hamza, welcome, and thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to learn more about your research.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the invitation. I hope everybody find this presentation interesting today. All right. Let me share my screen. Okay. I think everybody could see my screen here. All right. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about internationalization of higher education from within and from the global south. Well, Anatoly made a very interesting remark about why I put the plural in the global south, because I think it will be remiss in a sense to assume that the global south is a homogeneous entity, right? A global south, yes, is a state of disposition of subalternity, but we have to also acknowledge that there are varying levels of subalternity, because the world affairs are continuously, revamping themselves and shifting, right? So this is very important. So particularly, I'll be talking about intercultural philosophy and epistemological polylogue. So the first thing I want to mention here is to define what is the global south. The global south is actually a fundamental concept in the knowledges and the discourses and narratives of decolonial and post-colonial narratives. But there have been a lot of critiques on the global south, because assuming that, when you use the global south, the colonial north, one further reinforces these binaries, understanding the world is either black and white, which is not the case. But I think the global south is a useful imaginary for understanding how power imbalances shape us, shape how we understand ourselves, and how we understand education, and how internationalization of higher education is taking place. So first thing I should mention is the global south is not specifically a geographical location, although it has been popularized as so. So the global south, not just a place, although it is also that, but in this disposition. Again, the global south is not a geographical region, but a status of invisibility. That's important. That's why sometimes you could find the global south in the global north. So global south is not actually about the southern hemisphere, but more about this state of visibility. So this is very important here. It is commonly understood to include spaces of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. I mean, Africa is well understood to be global south. Asia, I cannot say the whole continent. There are some spaces that are increasingly gaining more, how can I say, visibility, more momentum, more influence and impact on how the world is shaped. And they don't have Latin America. Latin America is a very important space because most of the decolonial discourses come from there, actually, and the Caribbean. So again, the global south is not homogeneous. It's not because there are various levels of subalternity with overlapping systems of privilege subordination. Because the global south could be post-colonial, but post-colonial in different ways. And these countries are suffering, grappling with different challenges depending on the extent to which they have actually marked some sort of like distance from the colonial legacies they had suffered. So the global south can be found within the global north, since certain groups and minorities do not enjoy the same level of recognition in other contexts. Again, I would like to acknowledge that these terms are contested. A lot of scholars, a lot of people may not find them very accurately descriptive of the word, but they are helpful for us to understand what is going on actually in the world. All right. So again, this concept is used to highlight differences among individuals and communities in comprehending their existence. Because when certain knowledges are dominant, these people in the peripheries make use of these knowledges to make sense of themselves and their existence. So this is very important. Knowledge is power. This is something I'm going to discuss more deeply throughout this presentation. So again, here referring to Western, non-Western could be seen as binary, could be seen as reinforcing these differences. Epistemology frames the constitutive relationality between power and knowledge. Again, knowledge is power because the more powerful you are, the more likely you're going to be introduced and be seen and be perceived as better. We all are knowers, but there could be implicit assumption about our epistemic capacity, to what extent we could produce knowledge, and what kind of knowledge we're producing. This scientific or authentic, not derivative. That's very important. I remember a quote actually I was reading by Walter McNullo. I think some of you will be certainly familiar with his works. Back in the day, I mean, with the modernity and Renaissance, I mean, there was this assumption that Europe has science while the global South has culture. So the global South was always expected to talk about culture, about tradition, which is not the case. But I think now things are changing a bit. So again, all of the global north and south are contested terms. They help clarify not only the epistemological differences in what is counted as knowledge, but also flare the imbalanced appreciation of those knowledges. I think this is very important here. It's not about the originality or the origin, I will say, of these knowledges, but it's more about how these knowledges are being seen and perceived. It's very important because there are some imbalances in terms of the global production of knowledge. I mean, the most important infrastructure are centralized in the global north. So we're asking the question here, to what extent internationalization of higher education is again theorized and practiced according to the Western knowledges? Because internationalization is about diversity, about inclusion, but what if even the global south are again making use of internationalization according to the logic of the Western world? To what extent is they're helping themselves? So again, the use of these binaries are not to obscure, but to delineate two categories of thought and praxis of knowing which are valued individually worldwide. So what is epistemology of sound? This is by Sousa Santos and his seminal work in 2014. Indicate the thinking that is rooted in logic, historically produced, and culturally marked by the local realities, ecologies, and ontology sound and context. Here's some of the examples of these epistemologies. We have some research methods in non-Western context by McConey, De Sousa Santos, Ipsum of the South, Ascendancy, first century, Mike, Asian centricity, and the Chinese Minzo by Dervin. For instance, in South America, many societies had local system of agroecology inspired by their religious and cultural values, such as the Melpa in Mexico, or the War Imperial, which were later abandoned during the Spanish conquest. I'll give an example about this education. For example, where I come from Morocco, there's this traditional schools where people are learning the Arabic languages through memorization. They will be repeating sentences. But I understand later on this method was abandoned because of Chomsky theory and everything about generative. But I could say that I have learned myself Arabic in different ways than those people, according to the modern, let's say, methods of learning and teaching. And these people have studied traditional in this way. They speak Arabic better than me. So I'm asking to what extent the important theory from the global north always effective. Maybe you could also consider to what extent our knowledges could also have equal, rigorous, and original knowledge as well. Another example with genus epistemologies is Univir, which is in Latin America, which means good living English, which has been developed in Latin America to encourage breaking away with Western thought and advance the local perspective, to formulate dominant perspective. Okay. All right, so here let's talk about higher education. So the mainstream of higher education is relatively situated with the geographical and physical confines of the Anglosphere and Western Europe. I mean, you could look at the rankings, you could tell. Yeah, there are some exceptions, but generally, these rankings, well, I'm not sure about their usefulness or not, but they are actually centralized in the Anglosphere, US, Canada, Australia, and these places. Therefore, knowledge is coming from Africa, Latin America, and Asia, even from developed nations such as China, Japan, remain peripheral. Internationalization, universities, and geopolitics of knowledge. Geopolitics, mean, the workings of knowledge, knowledge prediction, and relation within knowledge, and how they are impacted by geopolitics. I think it will be kind of like naive to assume that our state as humans who are from different places, that our status as scholars is not actually touched, is not actually impacted by our geopolitical location. The geopolitical location is always there, especially when we talk about the locus of education. So here we have the entanglement of internalization of higher education, the skewed geopolitical knowledge, and epistemic injustice in contemporary universities. Because here I'm trying to understand to what extent internalization of higher education would not be kind of like a facade for, making sense or condemning or bypassing this dominance of Western narratives in the global South specifically. I'm talking with the global South because I have an insider experience into how universities work and how people think. So here I have the emergence of the knowledge economy and the growth of internalization having its objectives, aspiration, and the independent understanding of higher education across the world, different ways and lead different consequences. So here again, I want to talk about this. Concepts are not innocent. Concepts are ideologies. When we talk about internalization, this very concept is very powerful because it could be used as a rationale for implementing certain policies in certain ways. Because sometimes it's like a card. You can present it, you say, okay, we could do this, but I want to do it this way because it's a part of internalization. Because people have done it this way, we should also do it this way. This is very important. Concepts are not innocent. I will later talk about these notions that go with internalization, such as diversity and inclusion. We have to unpack them a bit, and we should not take them for granted, actually, because they are very powerful in how we understand things. So here we have historical legacies of coloniality continue to exist as a darker underside of Western modernity. Some might ask, why coloniality? Why not colonialism? Colonialism is different. Colonialism, which means that there's an army, there's a land. You take people land. Coloniality could be soft in a sense because it works through subtle systems and structures. It's not obvious to us. This coloniality. Coloniality does not have to be, in other people's land. You still take it. You could just work it out from far away and continue to exert your influence on the others, and how they understand themselves is very important. So internalization could be associated with modernity. Now modernity, post-modernity, all this thing. So despite the sensible inclusion of southern spaces into modernity, they remain at the margin due to their invisibility of modernity. A lot of countries, I'll say, from global south, they have done a lot of effort, make a lot of effort, to be included in this whole narrative of modernity. But they are the margins because they could see themselves as being influential, but it's not the case. Because being part of things does not necessarily that you are as influential as the others. Again, I have this example. There's a table, right? We have a table, we have a lot of chairs. You could have diversity inclusion. You have a table, and you have a chair at the table. It does not mean that you get to decide what is being discussed at the table, or who gets to decide, the kind of decision made after discussion at that table. So this is very important. So again, it is important to initiate a critical discussion in which internalization of higher education is doubted with regard to the advertised principle, objectives, and implementation, at least in the relation to after epistemic diversity. What I be arguing is that, all right, internalization could be promising, but we don't have to do it in the same ways that the others have done it. Maybe we should look look again at our conditions, the global south condition, and see what would work for them or what not. So we could ask the question, is internalization of higher education is an agenda for self-coloniality of knowledge? Because later on, I'll showcase an example from Moroccan University that could exemplify this very argument. So again, the global south, the state of inability that they are deceiving and of power, knowledge, and symmetries. Because there's this linguistic and epistemic dependency on the other. It's a risky business in a sense in the internationalization of one's universities without critical thinking about the relations with the knowledge. It's very important that you do internationalization in ways that serve your needs and conditions. But if one just import theory from the others and implement it in your own context, which may not be conceivable to success, that would may result in reinforcing this linguistic and epistemic dependency on the other. Our major concern here is that the processes of globalization, proliferation of internationalization agenda represent yet another vehicle to promote our empirical logic in the goods of the global. Yeah, we could say this. Moroccan University could say, okay, we'll import theories from the English sphere. And people would say, why we do that? But people say it's a part of internationalization, globalization, right? For example, let's look at this. Although the Gulf Museum, the Emirates, and the Qatar, for example, and some Asian countries are recruiting large numbers of English-speaking academics from developed countries. They're mainly but offer to establish Western models of higher education and to satellite campuses of Western University. This is a very bold argument here, but it's worth thinking about it in a sense. So to what extent Westernization is associated with internationalization? And it's very important. People who would come and implement these, they have to come from these countries. So it would make sense. Yes. Such practices rank the risk of aggravating epistemic injustices and further marginalizing local knowledges, as the curriculum is more likely to assume that Western esteem is inherently superior in value. Internationalization has agreeably covered the process formally assumed under the themes of Westernization, modernization, and liberalization. I will say in Morocco, for example, internalization means this very concept. It means Westernization, modernization, and liberalization. But internalization could be like soft in a sense. So these labels with their intended understandings may be understood as the very requirement of practice internalization. If you don't Westernize, then you're not doing internalization. This could be one of the understanding that people could got. Southern universities, University of Global South, may associate the process of internalization with the importance of reflecting the distinctive logics, culture, and workings of the Western model of universities. We need to ask this question. To what extent Southern universities do not really understand internationalization as being a copycat of the other universities in the Anglosphere? There could be the understanding. It's worth investigating this. So being internationalized is synonymous with being Westernized, especially considering neoliberal motives. And then it's important to consider the type of dominant discourse that shapes Southern universities' perception of internationalization. As long as internationalization will continue to be mainly conceptualized and theorized by the Anglosphere, its working will be according to the logic that are dominant in this sphere as well. Because we cannot simply assume that an important theory would always take into account the local condition and circumstances and restructure it in a way that will serve the needs, actually. I think it's very important we have to look at it. Again, while people are moving from the non-Western peripheries to Western centers, I think you will agree a lot of talent are moving from the global south, the global north. They studied there, they work there, and they shine there. So it's very important. You could even argue the colonial scholars they're very famous, are those people who have studied and worked in the global north. You could look at it, this is Santos or Magnolo, oh, it was Aid, all these people studied there and worked there. Even about decoloniality, this is very important to say that even people in the global south, they will give more importance, they will appreciate people who talk about decoloniality, but they are still theorizing it from the global north perspective. So this is a paradox here. So internationalization of higher education worldwide is characterized by Anglophone domination of the knowledge economy, evidenced by how 4 English-speaking countries, the US, UK, Australia, and Canada, are destination to over 50% of the students studying abroad. Well, this could be tell about how internationalization is taking place because it's English. And also a lot of people would associate English with internationalization. Speaking of this, is very important because what happens in knowledge production, sometimes I would write a paper about, for example, let's say Moroccan students or Moroccan teachers in English, right? It will be published in a journal, but there's a paywall. So the paper would appeal the most to people in Morocco, but people in Morocco would not be able to read the paper because it's paywall, and the universities do not have subscription actually to this paper. So sometimes the very knowledge we produce about the global south are not available, are not accessible with the global south themselves. So internationalization of higher education is a professionalized approach that takes place only through English. And knowledge of that language is enough for full participation in the academy. A lot of people say, as long as you speak English, you write in English, you're visible. But we have to reconsider that actually. But it's not possible to do things. You know, let's say we try to publish and do internalization through another language than English. I'm not sure if that would mean more visibility. It may mean more subordination actually, because at least we could use English to cast off the colonial baggage actually, and to speak back. So we could speak in ways that appeal to certain ears. That's very important, I will say. So the current discourse organization of higher education is mainly Western. I would agree. It may allow for Western-centric neoliberal tendency to be advanced through the discourse of internationalization. In Africa, for instance, internalization presents as an important instrument for socioeconomic development and a strategy for improving higher education. It's very important. I will take the example of Morocco again. Well, Morocco, a post-colonial country, it was colonized by the French in the 20th century. Morocco got its independence back in the 1956. And since then, French has been a fundamental language in the country. If you do not speak French, it's highly difficult. They would get respectable job in Morocco, especially if you wanna climb the ladder. It's very important. So recently, there have been some clashes between Morocco and France over its Sahara, and people and politicians are selling people this idea. Look, because we have this problem with France, and French has been very important. Let's use English. English does not have a colonial baggage in Morocco. English will save the country, will save us, will save education, will become more international. So this politics of distracting people from the very problems that are there by giving this kind of card of English that will serve everything, which is not the case. So in Africa, yes, I said this. So here I would look about Morocco. So they can contextualize this narrative I'm saying here. In Morocco, there are 13 public universities, 1 public university with private management. This is the university I'm going to talk about, right? We have 5 private universities. Higher education in Morocco is an area open to the investment. The state offers tax advantage and facilitates installation of private universities. Englishization is a fundamental practice in internationalization of higher education. This is how it is actually understood in Morocco, actually. So this is like overview of higher education system. Is about the number of students and everything. Okay. All right. So actually, there are a lot of foreign students are in Morocco, but they're mainly from sub-Saharan countries, from African countries. So more than 157 foreign students enrolled in different public and private higher education institutions. 5,000 students from the year 2017-2018. Morocco welcomes more than 4,000 foreign students per year. More than 60% of foreign students come from African countries. 95% receive a scholarship for the Moroccan government. So this is important because the tuition fees in Morocco is lower actually. So there have been some policies and projects to further, how can I say, making Moroccan universities international in a sense. This is focused on mobility of students, ensuring the mobility of Moroccan researchers, call for formalization and good practices, develop partnerships and international cooperation, and strengthen Morocco positioning in the international system. This is one project, the strategic vision in 1523. We have also the ministry plan of development of international cooperation strategies, focus in strengthening current cooperation programs with foreign countries, create and partnerships, consolidation of the cooperations with regional environment, and South-South cooperation, strengthening the ability of Moroccan student professors. So why would people come to Morocco to study? I mean, it's the ability of scholarship. So 90%, 95% of them receive a scholarship. The presence of more international parents comes to foreign universities and schools, the low tuition fees and the lowering living costs than other countries. There's less bureaucracy to obtain a visa than for European American countries and geographical location of Morocco. All right, I want to work in this. This is a university that is widely appreciated, widely respected in Morocco. It's called Al Akhawen University. And if you ask people, all right, Akhawen University, this university embraces the American liberal arts model, and all the courses are delivered through English. So I want to look at this university because if you ask anyone in Morocco, they will say, okay, which university is international? They will say this university, Al Akhawen University. I just wanted to focus in one thing, maybe the faculty who works in because faculty is seen as an important dimension of internalization of higher education. So I've looked at Akhawen University and have looked at 3 faculties, 3 schools. So for example, in the faculty in School of Business Administration, there are 26 full-time faculty, 17 Moroccan faculty, but most of them, they got their PhDs from the US, 3 PhDs from France, 3 PhDs from Canada, 1 PhD from the UK, and 1 PhD from China, 3 PhDs from Morocco. This is very important because I will explain later why. So 76.47% of the Moroccan faculty had their PhDs from the global north. And there are 9 non-Moroccan faculty, 4 Asian, 2 Turkish, and 2 African, 6 PhDs from the global north again, and 2 PhDs from Asia. So 66.66% of non-Moroccan faculty had their PhDs from the global north, actually. Again, I have looked at School of Humanities and Social Sciences, 35 full-time faculty, 15 are Moroccan faculties, 11 of them had PhD from the global north. 19 non-Moroccan faculty, 17, which is almost 9% of them, are from the global, got their PhD from the global north. Only 1 faculty from Asia and Africa, only 1. All non-Moroccan faculty had their PhDs from the global north, all of them. This is an international, this is a university understood to be international. School of Science Engineering, 35 full-time faculty, 29 Moroccan faculty, 20 of them had PhD from the global north, 8 from Canada, 7 from the US, 3 from Europe, 2 from the UK. 5 non-Moroccan faculty, 4 from the US with PhD from the US, and 20 from Europe with PhD from Europe. So all these numbers are important. Here I have everything combined so we could better understand what is going on actually. So in this university, there are 95 full-time faculty, 61 of them Moroccan faculty, which is 64, so 65. Out of 61 Moroccan faculty, 44 got their PhD from the global north, US, Canada, UK, and Europe. 33 non-Moroccan faculty, which is 35%. Out of 33 non-Moroccan faculty, 22 are from the global north, actually, are from the global north. And then Out of 33 non-Moroccan faculty, 30 faculty got their PhD from the global north. Out of 33 non-Moroccan faculty, only two got their PhDs from Asia and one only from Africa. I remind you again, Morocco is in Africa. So only one from all these faculty across all the schools. So here we could ask, do Southern universities implement internalization of higher education in their own terms and according to their own needs, aspiration, and condition, or it's only about importing knowledges from other places and implemented regardless of how the situation is? Is internalization the new label for bypassing linguistic culture epistemic hierarchies? Maybe we talk about internalization of whitening. The more white you make university, the more international you could sound the look. This is very important. This is something I'm working on for a book chapter is about selective internalization, because we have faculty from all over the world, but whether focus on a very limited number of people from specific places and use them as tokens for internalization. Go for the global south and north. Maybe the global south will focus on breaking people who have studied in the US and the UK and are from certain nationalities and bring them. They would not bring people from Africa, for example, or I don't know, Asia, Latin America, for example. And also the global north will focus on bringing those very, how can I say, prominent talent from the global south. So this is very selective. I will internationalize, but in ways that serve that I think that are useful for me, actually. So it's very selective, I would say. Again, would the work as internationalization benefit Southern universities? So again, Southern knowledges are limited to their spatial locality because internationalization may be used as a label through which universities can claim diversity without challenging dismantling Western dominance. Diversity doesn't mean much, actually. You could be diverse, but imbalances still exist because diversity is like a picture, it's an adjective, it's just describe what is going on, what the facade, but does not really intervene in how this relation with the knowledge are being, are taking place between these people and between universities and the system. So, although internationalization promotes collaboration between universities, agencies, and nonprofits, its efforts may often seem an one-way flow of knowledge from developing nations. There could be understood as internationalization. This is an assumption does not reflect the cosmological capabilities that internalization claims to provide. Again, this complication stems from the fact that internalization of higher education has largely been theorized and implemented from a more American perspective. Take a list into account how legacies of colonial expansion impose unique demands on universities. Again, post-colonial contexts are still grappling with the enduring colonial legacies, colonial knowledge. Some countries still grappling with coloniality. So how could make internationalization fit within this kind of context, within this condition? Decolonizing effort in higher education have not been smooth or linear. For example, there have been some attempts to decolonize, for example, in South Africa and Brazilian universities. You could read the whole paper and understand how this has not been very successful, actually, because these colonial structures are very adamant. So while Southern contexts are overwhelmed by the struggles towards intellectual decolonization, the internalization of higher education might even complicate these issues if it's not conceptualized and wisely. So decolonization of higher education is expected to undermine academic imperialism, racial variance in academia. These are serious issues, and people have been talking about them, investigating them for a while now. Again, this is my remarks. I think it's very important that we pay attention to these late celebrated labels and notions of diversity and inclusion. What do they mean? What does diversity mean? How diversity would look like? What is inclusion? And how does inclusion look like? Because it could include some people but as tokens, we tell you like we're doing diversity, but we're not changing much actually. So why decide to study work in some contexts and not others? I understand this decision are conditioned by a lot of factors. So it's very important to look at them and why people would decide to go some place or not others. Is internalization driven by neoliberal concerns? I think this genuine attempt to take the rest of the world seriously. Does the global south have a say in how internalization of higher education is theorized and exercised, or it's mostly the imported theory from the global north? All these are very important questions that we need to tackle. I would like to invite you actually to try this kind of exercise. I mean, it will be interesting exercise because we all understand now it's all about. The top is mostly the U.S. and U.K. on the Anglosphere. What if Africa actually was the actual Europe? An Anglosphere and Black supremacy was the norm. What if everything shifted? How would the landscape of knowledge would look like? What internalization of higher education would mean actually? This is some of the points I imagine. It's an imagination, and I invite you to as well. That could be very interesting. So, for example, modernity will be defined by the mainstream intelligence of Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. The highest ranking universities will be in Kenya, Mali, and Cameroon. To ostensibly receive the best possible education that would significantly propel one job prospect and epistemic capacity, one would need to spend some time in Africa. The online exception will be if one was accepted and endorsed by Africa, they will be welcomed and positively perceived everywhere. This is the kind of like, I will say, implication of my imagination, and I'm sure you could add more to this. Again, there's other point. International talent will be seeking opportunities in Africa. Internalization would mean the Africanization of institutions, frameworks, and policy and people. Africa would be selective in receiving immigrants. Will impose stringent visa requirements on people coming from the global north, which is the global south in this imagination. The global north will be grateful for the African colonization of Europe and the Anglosphere because they had built roads that would facilitate colonialism. Institution and I report, the colonization would mean the Africanization of all spheres of existence. So here, the main point I'm talking about is intercultural philosophy. Intercultural philosophy, it's about encouraging this reciprocal enlightenment. You enlighten me and I enlighten you. There's this kind of like interepistemic dialogue between us, and both of us are seen as equal, and both of us are seen to have this very valid and authentic knowledge about, to emphasizing what epistemic dialogue is, the plural of dialogue. So currently the state of knowledge is singular in a sense. All right. And what's the main point about intercultural philosophy? Because the formulation of questions and problems, because when we talk about internalization, we need also to be careful to the kind of questions and the kind of problems and the kind of solution we provide. To what extent they are driven, to what extent they are impacted by knowledge coming from all over the world and not a very specific, limited space and a group of people. So this is very important here. So this will combine different thinking traditions, each of them with their own formulations of questions. Very important, the right questions would lead us to certain answers as equal parts of this course. So here about intercultural, this Weimar, this thing which is 4 different types of culture centrism, the influential intercultural encounters philosophy. We have this expensive one, which means that there's a center. There's a center where Ryan's true fate, definite knowledge, objective progress, and there is a periphery ruled by paganism, superstition, backwardness, and development. This is A, the first one. Integrative, relatively recognize the value of the periphery, but it claims that no further activity of the center is thought to be necessary, since the activity of the center is so strong that every activity comes from the periphery aiming to adapt oneself to way to the center. Separate, accepts the coexistence of different convictions side by side, emphasizing diversity, multiculturality, but consider cultural differences to be unsurmountable. Tentative, centrism encourages dialogue, perceiving every concrete instance of thinking is not held to be final proposition, leading to process of influencing which can be intended to develop mutual argumentation. This could be visualized more in the comment slide. This one here. This is polylogue of knowledges. So if we take different, for example, we take different universities, different countries, and we look how the type of influences taking place among these institutions, we could see this. So the first one is unilateral centric. Just A teaches B, A teaches C, and A teaches D. I mean, I would not teach a strong word, but we'll say send their knowledges. Then we have unilateral and transitive. There's some dynamics, but it's still, taken or dominated by certain knowledges. A to B and A to C and A to D and C, which indicate a chain of influence. Since that A informs, teaches B, then it imparts that knowledge to C. Partially bilateral and multilateral influence exemplifying dialogues. So you could see this being like this kind of picture, which entails a relative appreciation of the knowledge without reaching a complete mutual influence. This is what we could be looking for, is the complete multilateral influence established in dialogue among, which mean influence is everywhere. Everybody is influencing everybody in varying levels. Actually, this is very important. It's not only imaginative, it's not only symbolic, but it's taking place actually instant. So A to B, there's an exchange of influence, A and C, A and D, and C and B and D. What's going on? With equal intensive influences from outside to outside. It's very important from outside to outside in a multidirectional dynamic. I think very important we have to look at this type of injustice, right? It's very important. This testimonial injustice that one would judge someone's an individual capacity of knowing, of interpreting, of explaining things based only on their race, gender, location, disability. I think once in a while we are guilty of this in a sense. Maybe not now, maybe before, we judge people based on the way they look, the way they sound. It occurs when someone testimony, opinion, knowledge is assigned a low level of credibility because of their affiliation with a particular group. Which is more dangerous is this one, is hermeneutical injustice. Hermeneutical injustice said that because of the long years, long centuries of dominance from some knowledges, the paraphrase are struggling to interpret, to understand, to explain their own experiences, because they have been told that to explain, to understand, to make sense of their experiences, they have to use certain theories. But those theories were not made, were not constructed to attend to their own conditions and circumstances. This is very important. So this lack of available knowledge renders the experiences unfit to any concept or analysis known to them or the other. Sometimes they will have to force a certain theory to explain some phenomena in the periphery. And this is very dangerous, actually. So persons who have been historically included and continue to struggle to interpret their ontologies and ecologies. So this is an ideal situation. I'm talking about the polylogue. It's an ideal situation, but we could at least strive to realize it. It can serve as a favorite type of thinking to underpin destruction of higher education, practice, and internalization. It can be used as framework of necessary knowledge circulation in higher education. It's very important here. The first step is to treat everyone equally as a knower. Everybody is a knower, especially those people whose epistemic dignity has been hurt. It's very important. We're all are knowers. Again, epistemic polylogue can undermine the several ways in which scholarship, pedagogy, and policy in higher education privilege with certain construct. They encourage practice that not only promote something personal, but also applying them. It's very important here. So the main here is not just, having to distinguish parts of the word does not work. Maybe you could look and see more ways of how we could establish equal and cross-influential interaction among all the spaces. In the way we see internalization, the way we do it, actually, is very important. Because the issue could be that global partnerships tend to be unidirectional, as universities in other spaces are informing and disseminating knowledge to universities in different spaces. So these practices could lead to production, epistemic, and economic dominance, even with higher education practices designed to address this. We could be thinking, okay, we're doing diversity here, we're doing inclusion, but in fact, it's not, it's the opposite. And then final marks. Intercultural philosophy represents nuance, resistance, and relation. Because we have to resist, right? We have to resist, but we have to resist in our own possibilities, in the ways that could produce the most influence. Is not to resist without any sort of plan or policy. It's very important. It gobbles the elm of intelligent epistemic dependency, internalization effort. And finally, we have to theorize resistance through the same. We should be careful not to theorize resistance through the same lenses that have perpetuated epistemic injustice in the first place, because it's largely going to produce the same effects of colonial dynamics. That's it for me. I hope this has been interesting and useful, and I welcome your feedback and questions. Thank you. Thank you, Anatoly.